My final word on DEI, I will defend it to the extent that it is making work and education life easier for people that have been marginalized and is making it more fair for them and making accommodations for them. I will not defend it to the point where bourgeois graduate school people actually take it, make it an occupation and a business model of which they invent all kinds of language that doesn't have anything to do with the people that they say that they're working for. It is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free. Good morning, friends and family. It is another Friday, Freedom Friday, but you are still not free. And hopefully you'll be freer after this hour with Sharif, Ish, and me. We are here to bring the heat on yet another issue. So this week we are going to talk about something that we just don't need, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Who is ever going to sign up for something like that? I'm lying. What we're really going to talk about is DEI being under attack nationally by a well-coordinated campaign, mostly fostered by right-wing think tanks with posh offices in Washington, D.C., who are sending out model laws and model strategies to their affiliates in different states so that they can attack diversity and equity inclusion programs within colleges, within schools, within corporations, even within private businesses, which is interesting for libertarians or for conservatives to do because, they're the ones about free market enterprise, meaning they want the government out of the lives of especially private organizations and private places. But yet in this case, they want to outlaw those corporations from doing any trainings that teach their employees how to live together and work together and understand difference. And in some cases, what DEI does is to prevent them as capitalists from getting sued, right? So it's not completely altruism why there would even be DEI in corporate America. But I think it's important for us to talk about it, not because of the corporations, but because of the implications of rolling back a focus on racial progress for people that have been denied progress for a very long time. So we're going to talk about it today on Freedom Friday. Fellas, how are you doing?
Good, man. Good to see you. Doing well. Important topic. And looking forward to diving in.
Very locked in.
How you doing,
I might have
Ish?
to start sporting a hat.
Doing
I
well.
noticed every week you two got your hats on.
You got to do it, man.
They're never straight. They're always to the side,
Well,
looking
come on, man.
Fat
Tilted to
Albert's
the
crew.
got to tilt the hat a little bit. Well, listen, there's this New York Times article that's about the issue that we're talking about today. And it says in the beginning, the backlash against wokeism, in quotations marks, has led a growing number of states to ban DEI programs at public universities. Thousands of emails and other documents reveal the playbook and grievances behind one strand of the anti-DEI campaign. I should say that if you read this is a very deep article that looks through a lot of private emails and looks through a lot of documents that are not available, not known to the public so much about the crusade here. It does appear as though the real goal is to roll back the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's the real long game. The short game is to start with these type of challenges to state policy, but the long game is to get rid of that pesky Civil Rights Act of 1964. I'm going to start just by asking y'all, just in general, where are you at on the DEI scale? And I'm asking this question because I'm a little bit in the middle. Some DEI stuff gets on my nerves. I'm just going to be honest. I'm just going to say it from the beginning. I'm just going to say it. Some of it goes to a place where...
Pray tell. Tell us, pray tell.
Some of it goes to a place that drives me crazy and is a little bit annoying. There's this jargony DEI, graduate school. I've been in this job too long. Stuff that I just don't understand. I just don't get some of it. And at the same time, I will defend the hell out of it from people that want to attack it and get rid of it because... if I have to choose a side, I'm going to choose a side that annoys me over the one that's trying to kill me. So anyways, that's where I'm at on the scale. Where are you guys at with your DEI journey?
Well, I mean, I'm definitely, further than the middle. And I sympathize with you. I think some of it is a generational piece. How one generation talks about DEI and how like our generation has talked about it, even if we didn't use that language. So for me, I'm always a little like it seems like it's new language for something every day, and sometimes it's necessary. Other times it's just people got a degree. You said in the job too long. Sometimes they've been in there 2 days and already, like, well, this is what this is. And like, sit down, live a little bit, you know what I mean? Experience life a little bit, but as far as like the grounding principle of having, equity, including people and, having diverse, like respecting everybody as human beings and humankind. Like to me, that was, the original kind of version of DI, just like what's just, what's being just mean? What does anti-racist mean? And so that part, that grounding principle, I'm all in for, all in for that. And I do sometimes like, smirk and shake my head at some, sometimes the book learned, but not the life learned folks. So, but yeah, but I still love them. I mean, it's like having a little brother, a little sister, who came home and feel like I discovered something. Like, that's 10,000 years old, but it's new to them. And so
Right.
I welcome the conversation.
Yeah, man. I mean, like anytime in my mentality, anytime in the mainstream kind of dialogue, there's a crawl space open where certain things can be discussed more, certain policies can be pushed for the benefit of Black people, other folks of color. I think that is just a natural way of kind of negotiating within an unfree space, right? Which is always the case. And I found it real interesting at the beginning how you prefaced it of like rolling back the Civil Rights Act of '64. Let's not forget how they rolled back the 14th Amendment, right? Which the Civil Rights Act of '64 was just saying this is law. You should be doing this, right? This does apply to everybody. So I think it's just very interesting how these things keep on going on the way they keep on going on. But anytime there's a crawl space, no matter through DEI or anti-racist pedagogy or any critical pedagogy, anything you want to call it, you open up that space, folks are going to enter into that space and then start creating these type of things.
Mm-hmm.
It
Everything
feels
has
to me
a
a little
lineage,
bit.
right?
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. Like everything has a lineage, because I was about to go and say this DEI doesn't feel like it's ours. It feels like it doesn't feel like its lineage is with us. I actually feel like it's an offspring somewhere or a distant cousin to something that we care about. We've been talking about racial progress for years. We've been talking about racial justice for years, social justice for years. We've been talking about civil rights and civil liberties. All of these things have a lineage within the Black world. And it was our kind of, I should say, gift to the United States. But when it comes to DEI, that feels very much like that came out of IBM and corporate affirmative action, right? Like it feels very much like corporate affirmative action stuff that is meant to be an insurance policy against racial discrimination lawsuits. And so DEI corporate positions were created, and I do think that that's where, correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like that's where this all came from, and it might be why the language is so weird, so jargony. It's not rooted in anything that we have been fighting for years. It's actually rooted in corporate culture. Fight me on this. Tell me I'm wrong. Ooh, no fight.
I don't know
Good.
if I don't know if I could fight that. I mean, just and again, I think just how things evolve, right? Like, I was accustomed to civil and human rights, which covered, you know, uh, a lot of things. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do you go beyond that, right? So each of those, are very specific, and it was, there was two groups of folks, there's many groups of folks, but, there's one group like that was going through the legislative process and policy and legal, really talking about civil rights. Then there was another, angle that kind of encompassed that plus more and like, hey, this is about human rights. Like, what does a human being deserve? And the reason why I love that is then you can't talk about like, oh, this is only for black people. This is only for people. No, it's human beings. And if you're a human, no matter what color, background, blah, 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 here are the basic things. And I think we never came to the agreement with the white power structure that everybody's a human being, so I think that is still where the crux of the issue is. Everyone doesn't deserve clean water, freedom, freedom from, the oppressive policies. Like everybody, they don't agree that everybody should have that. So I think that is the starting point. Everything else is like, just fodder after that. If you can't agree that human beings all deserve, there is a brotherhood of human beings, and even if you're on the evil side of it, there's the starting point, the genesis of it all, will continue to influence the future of it all.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like this idea of like it's intellectual genealogy coming from corporate kind of like marketed, like how can we use this? But Sharif, I think you hit it right on the head, right? Are we talking about diversity in that system? Are we talking about inclusion in that system? And see, that's where it loses me, right? Where it just becomes like this kind of like integrated part of a power structure, quite frankly, that dehumanizes most people that look like us here and abroad, right? And so when we're talking about how we integrate ourselves into that burning house, right? How we are included and how we gain equity within that house as other exploitation, right? A higher percentage of the thievery and robbery that goes down, right? I think that we lose sight of what you were just bottom lining before, which is the real intellectual tradition, right? Of focusing on human rights, recognizing the civil rights of all people and individuals. And when we place it a model within a system and within a structure, just by default, it's going to replicate and produce and reinforce that structure rather than dismantle the very thing that has created it for it to exist in the first place, right? Why would somebody do that? And so when I think of DEI, I think of that. But again, I still double down on the fact that that's still a crawl space. That's still a place where folks can get in and start like messing with things and making things happen and move. Maybe without that, they wouldn't be able to.
You can't do much in a crawl space, though. Ish, you know what I mean? It's pretty tight.
Oh, I'm
But you
not
know what?
saying miracles.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about it is, it's not that they disagree with DEI, right? The Supreme Court has DEI. They have a little diversity. They have inclusion, and from their angle, they have equity. So it's not a problem. And whether it's the Supreme Court today and what it's traditionally been, once they started, they would even look at what is it? The Continental Congress is being diverse. Yeah, white folks from the north. Yeah, white folks from the south. Yeah, white folks who were planters. Yeah, white folks who were merchants. To them, that was as diverse as they needed it. They didn't need it any further. Their problem happened when they're like, wait a minute, you talking about other people that we don't even consider people to be a part of this? Like, yo, I got a problem with diversity. But before that, they would tell you, oh no, it is diverse. What are you talking about? Look it up. We talk with a southern drawl. You talk like a northern Yankee. Like that's the extent of the diversity and inclusion that they want.
I think you're being a little bit negative because, sometimes people have country and Western music, It's like we got both kinds of music. We got country and Western.
I still don't know the difference.
Well, listen, the world's richest man, Elon Musk, or somewhere near the richest man, he bought Twitter and converted it to X, which is basically like transforming the platform from being a social media platform to being 4chan. He has created like a new platform for racists just to let their freak flags fly. He fired all of the people at Twitter that are responsible for DEI or moderating posts and moderating white supremacist posts. And he has recently been going on a tear. He now owns one of the biggest platforms in the world that gets to the most people. And he's gone on a tear about DEI. He has like put out a whole bunch of posts anti-DEI. He calls it anti-white. Says it's anti-white, anti-Asian. It's discriminatory to white people. There is this sense that DEI is for everybody but white people. So like it's for all the minorities of different sorts. So then you know how white people are sometimes. If they're not the center of something, then it must be bad, right? So even so, they don't see themselves in it, so it must be bad. So we must get rid of it. But for the world's richest man to put this on one of the world's biggest platforms and to be pushing this is real interesting, given the fact that world's richest man became the world's richest man because of Tesla. And Tesla, as an organization, as a company, has been sued multiple times and has lost multiple times due to racial discrimination within the workplace. They have had multiple Black employees who have sued them regarding racist abuse within the factories and within the organization, some of which has just been real kind of like old school direct being called the N-word on a regular basis by many different people. And it's part of the culture. It's not like a one-off, right? Multiple people, multiple Black people have sued. So, and they've lost millions of dollars. One of the suits resulted in $137 million settlement. Now, of course, the courts being what the courts are, basically sidecars to capitalism. They reduced that because the judge thought, well, we know that's what you were awarded, but we think it's a little excessive. So they cut it down. But $137 million is not a insignificant loss for a racial justice claim, especially when you've had more than one of them. So anyways, that's what makes me think why. That's why I think the world's richest man is on one of the biggest platforms in the world trying to lead people in an effort against DEI, is because it does result in losses in some places, right? We don't need anybody stopping us when we get into these white spaces from being called the N-word or, being discriminated against. And that's why I feel like it's not a bad corporate program, but it does feel like a corporate program. It doesn't feel like it's meant to bring justice about in the world. And I don't know if I want diversity anyways. I'm just going to say it. I don't want everybody. I don't want everybody to be included. I want to curate my life. I want to coordinate, I'm joking. I love diversity. I love equity and inclusion. I don't know what equity means. I feel like I know what inclusion means. We have excluded many people from the workforce, especially people with perceived disabilities from the workforce, and that comes out of federal law. That makes a lot of sense to me. The equity part, people use that word in education, they use it in corporate. I still don't think that they have a common definition of what that means.
Yeah, the simplest definition, I think, for equity is, is really looking at like what were the policies, procedures, rules, and regulations that you use to suppress people. How is that still a thing in motion stays in motion until it's interrupted? Equity is supposed to interrupt that thing in motion. This white supremacist policy, law establishing space, and it's supposed to address that. Like that's what equity is. So whatever it is to counter that, to stop that motion, that's what equity could be in that vessel of equity. So it'll look differently in different things. So because they have to look and see like, okay, how is the law used to suppress this group and uplift and center this group? Okay, let's analyze it. All right. So if we look at housing, it's like, oh, redlining. Oh, all right. And you were denied, loans. Okay, equitable, solution to this is addressing the lack of financial investment, the lack of, access to loans, that lack of access to certain housing. So things put in place to address that could be put in the equity lens. So it's supposed to be an interrupter. And remind, and keep in mind, equity isn't the end game. Equity is the interrupter. The end game is justice. Use equity to kind of reshape things, reimagine things, recreate things, and you're supposed to recreate it with a lens of justice. Right? Like that's the end game, to be just. Equity is supposed to be the path that removes the barriers, gets rid of the boulders, and allows you to continue the journey. And a big part of America is we've never gotten even close to justice. you know, it's that Malcolm quote, like, you haven't even acknowledged the knife in my back, let alone try to address and heal it. If we can't get to truth, we can't get to reconciliation. If you can't get to truth, then you can't get to equity, which means you'll never get to justice.
Yeah, and Sharif, I think you again hit it right on the head, because even when you talk about DEI, right? How long have we been talking about that in this country? Like 3 to 4 years, and so like already it's being rolled back, and it's being so like you got to be able to like think about like how long do these things even last, and or how long are people even willing to put the resources behind fighting for justice, fighting for what's necessary, that end game that Sharif is referring to. And this country has a long track record of maybe speaking to it, maybe a little, superficial kind of on the surface type stuff happening. But ultimately,
it's a country of commercials.
Yeah,
it's a country of commercials.
But like that's why when they talked about DI from jump, I'm like, yeah, that's nice. You know what I mean? But like that deep tissue stuff, we had to be honest. Like we aren't talking about it. We aren't getting to the truth in order to head towards reconciliation. So if that knife's still in my back, you telling me that I should just get over that knife being in my back, man. I'm like, I ain't messing with you. So like we got to really, think and understand what we're dealing with right now, because sometimes I think a lot of us are lulled to sleep simply because maybe we drive a fancy car. I don't know.
And you had a black president. You got a black president. You got cable, and you got today's version of a Cadillac. You know what I mean? So what they like? What more do you want? And half of us are like, what more do we want?
Yeah.
It's listen. January 6th. That's been happening towards human rights, civil rights, DEI, whatever it is, from the very beginning. Like that January 6th episode is like Groundhog Day. One of those movies I never saw, but it's like pop culture. You know what it means, right? Like it's literally the same exact thing, except it wasn't just the Capitol. Before it might be in black neighborhoods. It might be in, the legislative body. It could be, who's that? Who was the congressman back in the day that was Thurman? Who was
Strom Thurman.
The one who was like clobbered in Congress when he was a abolitionist.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Whatever. But he was a congressman. He was an abolitionist. They can't. I mean, they enslaver beat him half to death on the Congress floor. So like this is that mentality for speaking out against white supremacy and it's not even a privilege, just this like insidious desire to oppress others. It's safe in this country. It is safe. It is safe to be that way. It is safe to do that. And you see it playing out, whether it's a school, whether it's business folks, whether it's, I read that article, if it's a organization trying to help, looking at the data and saying, oh, more black women are dying during childbirth, so we have an organization to support that. And for them to come like, hey, you helping black people. And back to Elon thing, doesn't he have his family of ties to South Africa? So nobody should be listening to him about anything around equity, justice, race. Nothing should be coming out of his mouth. He should be shutting the hell up and trying to learn about like what it actually all means.
So a couple of thoughts on diversity. We're a representative government. So if your government doesn't look like the population, you don't have equity. You don't have fairness. If you look at the presidency, we've had one president that wasn't white in all the history of the United States. That's not representative. So if we are a representative government, we are failing in that regard. If you look at Congress right now, I think we have 3 senators, black senators, maybe 4, a small number out of all of them. It's a very few number of senators. And the Senate is supposed to
4.
I'm trying to think of if I'm missing somebody, but it's very few, I guess.
It's very tiny, even historically, now and historically, right? Yeah.
And it always has been. So if you took a picture of all the presidency, you took a picture of all of the Senate, that would be the most august body of people that run things. They're the ones that make the laws that we all have to live by. They're the ones that create the rules, and they are not representative. So diversity would be the goal. The goal would be to say, no, we've got to make this body more reflective, more representative of the American people. We need to make it more diverse. So then you start instituting ways to make it more diverse. Like, what has stopped it from being diverse so far? And let's break down the barriers. The moment you start doing that and some people start losing some seats is the moment that they collect and use their white power to say, you got to stop that. Whatever program you just put into place to diversify this all white body, governors is the only other thing. I don't think we have a non-white governor. I could be missing one, but all the governors are white, right? So in the lower office is like representative.
Just Westmore.
Westmore. And we used to have, I think Virginia had one or whatever, but it's always it's always the first Black governor. And I think there's only been a couple, like a few. My point in saying all that is that's a problem. It's not representative. We're supposed to be representative government. So if you start trying to address that problem by making sure that these things look more representative of the country, you face backlash. And not just backlash, you face power. Like, power tells you, no, you can't do that. I'm sorry about your whole like not being diverse and representative, but not a single one of us, and by us I mean the white population, not a single one of us should lose a seat for you to find justice and to find justice. So that's diversity. And then on equity, as you were talking, the way that I think about equity is when you have a marriage and you have two spouses. One, in the entire time that they have been a spouse, there go the balloons. See, I'm gonna stop doing hand movements because these programs keep throwing up the balloons. So you have a marriage, and you start to dissolve the marriage, and you've had two spouses, one who has worked outside the house and one who has worked inside the house. The court doesn't say to the person who has worked inside the house, you have no equity in the property. They don't say you get nothing because you didn't put any money into this, and the one working party put all the money. What they say is you're partially responsible for the maintenance and the paying of this house, right? And that's why you have things like alimony and supports that divide the assets when people dissolve a marriage, is because they both have equity in the thing that they have built, but only one of them is saying that they should have all the equity. Like, I bought the house. Well, you bought the house, but you had a wife. You were you didn't do all the work, and the courts recognize this thing called equity. That other person, your spouse, has equity in all your marital properties, right? You were been together. You have all put something in. We look at America as, in all the years that African Americans and others invested in this country and got no money for it. If we are going to dissolve, we need a payout, right? Because we have equity in this country. That's a different way of looking at equity. It's not like, make things equitable. It's no, we have literally equity in this property. And you are not letting us draw out our money and our equity for the thing we have equity for. Inclusion to me is the least controversial of the three. I mean, a compassionate society is going to find a way to make, each one have a place. So I think a lot of that has to do with people with seen or unseen disabilities, or people that need help in some way that we shouldn't disagree with anyways. That's my take on the diversity part and the equity part. The inclusion part to me feels not controversial at all. Would y'all agree with the marriage part, though? Like the equity, like we have a stake. If we were to dissolve, if we were to divorce, there's some people that are calling for some of the states to divorce the other states. Like they're calling for the red states to divorce, which actually, to be very honest with you, people who are watching this, if you're in a red state, I just want to be real with you. You would lose in that divorce because red states are the biggest welfare recipients in the country. Actually, the blue states are funding you. Actually, the blue states are sending more money to you than you put in. So all this talk you do, red states, about welfare and all of that, you are some of the biggest welfare queens there are. So you better knock it off, because New York is paying a lot more into the system for what they get than Alabama is. So if y'all want a divorce, have at her, but y'all not going to be living too well after that. Look at the sea. Now I got fireworks going on. That's the opposite of COINTELPRO. They're like, this brother's blowing up. What do y'all think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in some ways that divorce has already happened, but I think it's a layered divorce. It's a divorce, but they still, have their say, right? Like it's like, oh no, this is two Americas, but really is it? If the Senate and the Supreme Court and if this presidency happens again and they are reddish of the red, like is that really how did they go from separate, right? Like if the power still lies in that space, and when you look at history, it was some of the same things. Like, yeah, they could have been the minor. They'll just say, well, it was only a few white folks that enslaved people. But like, who's everybody that benefited from it? Forget who had someone on their plantation. Let's trace who benefited from it, and that's stretched across, right? And so I think if it is the division of the states, it's not necessarily the states, it's people in power versus those who don't. And then if I'm in power, how do I get people who also don't have power to still align with me and my interest, which has always happened, whether you're a recent immigrant, whether you were, dirt poor, what they used to, call the old cracker, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like what? Dirt poor, but still their interest was more aligned.
Okay,
so
we got to stop for a second. There's a teachable moment because you just said cracker. You're gonna trigger a whole bunch of people by saying that. I mean, you remember once when I was in Philly and we did a show in Uncle Bobby's.
What did you say? You said something.
I said I feel like we're in the cracker matrix. I feel like we're locked into the cracker matrix, and I got a lot of feedback.
You got
after
so
that.
You got so much heat for that.
And I still contend that we are living in the cracker matrix. But what I had to educate people on, because they were like, well, that's the version of the N-word for white people. First of all, there is really no version. There is really not. There is no version of the N-word for white people. There just isn't one, so stop
Facts.
it. But there is a literal meaning to cracker. Cracker was the guy who had the whip, and he would crack the whip and snap it on your back. That is an official position. That is not a slur. That is a literal occupation, right? So when I say we are living in the cracker matrix, I am saying we are living in the matrix of the person that cracks down on us in the same way that they used to beat us before, right? So don't come at me. Don't come at Sharif, because I heard Sharif say cracker. I just wanted to make sure. Teachable moment. The show is about education. Anyways, I didn't mean to stop you, brother.
Jump in there, Ish. No, good.
I just want to veggie back off of that, because one thing folks also need to recognize that also so-called all slurs or whatever that you would even call a white person actually display the power dynamic. Whether you're talking about, from the 70s when folks used the word honky, right? That's from folks outside honking their horns, right? In their neighborhoods, right? That's where the word comes from. So like these power dynamics of even how that operates within it. I'm telling you, man.
I never knew that.
I never knew it
either. And I haven't even heard that word since the set. I'm like,
it's like that's an old one. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
but I'm just trying to show, like, all those type of things come from like the power dynamics and the reality of the, what's going on.
I think last time I heard that word was on the Jeffersons.
Oh God! And Ish, to your point, those words never had as much power. Calling somebody a honky or calling somebody a cracker never had any power to it. It was actually just ridicule. It's just ridiculing. And it wasn't like, the N-word is a word that you heard right before you died. It was a word you heard right before your last breath was taken. Right. Oftentimes it was a word you heard that made you get back on the sidewalk or off the sidewalk or look down or don't look up or run or get in your car and hide or whatever. That's what that word. That's the power of that word. When somebody said cracker, you cracker honky, listen, and someone's going to this is going to be a clip somewhere. Someone's going to say, oh my God, I can't believe they're talking all this racist stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Just look it up and read
That's
these
why we
things.
shouldn't have DEI.
This is why we shouldn't have DEI. See what they're going to do? They're going to come in our corporations and they're going to make it okay to call us honkies.
Make us feel bad.
Make us feel bad about our. All right. Well, listen, we've talked mostly positively about DEI. And I think that comes from the fact that DEI programs in colleges make life better for some people. DEI programs within corporations, like these people that sued Tesla and like these people that are constantly suing corporations for valid claims of racism, it is a good program or system to have in place that helps people understand the repercussions of their actions, right? Like in the workplace, we can't be doing X, right? And the X is like dumb stuff that makes it hostile for other people to work here. That just makes sense. But we haven't talked about the downside of DEI. And I think I talked a little bit about it in the beginning. But I think DEI has morphed into something that gets on my last goddamn nerves. We call it overwokeness. Like sometimes you can be overwoke, and sometimes you can be too college educated. And you start developing language that doesn't even resonate with the people you supposedly are working for or the people on their behalf. And you start sounding like you've said this a lot of times, Sharif, like Malcolm used to talk about making it plain. Fannie Lou Hamer talked about making it plain, right? Like she didn't use all this Roy Wilkins language about everything or whatnot. So when I hear things like, allyship and keep going down the list, I'm going to forget all these little phrases, but I have watched people, I've watched people talk in a whole language of that to the point where I've like, I don't even know what you're saying anymore. Right. Performative allyship, divestiture of blah, 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 instructors and all this type of stuff. I'm a reasonably intelligent person, but sometimes these young folks in these jobs where they're making $170,000 a year to talk this talk, they lose me. I don't even know what they're talking about anymore. And that to me feels like you went to a bad place. If I don't understand you, and I don't think that my cousins would understand you when you are talking all this stuff, it makes me feel that you are missing the Fannie Lou Hamer principle. You are missing the Malcolm principle of it's not performance for those other people. It's for us, and you are losing us because we don't understand half what you're talking about. Is that a valid critique?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely say so. I mean, we're supposed to be no matter where you look at yourself in fighting for justice, ultimately you're supposed to be doing that, for and with the people. And I get there's space in it where sometimes you may be further away because you are in that courtroom nonstop and you're doing, you know what I mean? Like you may be in this particular space, and you can't lose sight of who you're working with, because at some point it becomes dangerous where it just becomes about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you winning in that courtroom or in that thing. And it may not be tied back to the people. Right. And so there's a danger in that. We've seen that, happen. So I think that, you named those, and, one of my favorite folks is Ella Baker, right? Like what's this, this servant leadership orientation, and I just think it sounds, and I'm not saying like everybody who does it, because and I think if people are sophisticated with words, that's one thing. I don't really care, even though it might be a little annoying. I do think it's really, really important to stay grounded.
I just realized that I'm probably the only one on this podcast that ever worked in corporate. Like corporate.
Yeah, I've never.
Okay. So you might be in a workplace where you are made to go to a mandatory meeting during your workday and go and sit and to listen to a variety of things. This comes up all the time, like a mandatory training of some sort. Sometimes you go sit in those trainings and it's something that's like, you're just like, cool. If it gets me out of doing that other nonsense that I've been doing all day long, cool, I'll come and sit in this. Sometimes you come in and you don't even know why you're there. But imagine a worker.
You sound like a teacher, bro.
Was that?
You sound like a teacher and a principal. Like it was like, well, this is not. I got to go to this joint. It doesn't make sense. It's not relevant to what I'm doing.
It's like PD in a way. It's like corporate PD. Then it's like some of it you feel is useful, some of it you don't. But I would just give you And Ish, I want to hear your advice on this or your thought about this. You have a worker in a workplace, and they go in one day. They're called into a meeting, and it's the union, and the union is telling them we are not getting paid enough. We are our claims are not being heard. Our voice is not being heard. It is screwing up our work conditions. And if we band together, we can fight this, and we can get the pay we deserve, the dignity we deserve, and a work day like we deserve. And then the next day, you go into a meeting, and you have somebody talking to you about colonial or settler colonialism, allyship, blah 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 blah, and you're like, can I go back to work? You're like, because that union meeting has a material consequence to your life and does something for you. That colonial settler meeting sounds like a good break from your workday. It's just actually not contributing thing. And the reason I want you, because I know you support both of those things. So I want to say that specifically to you and tell me, just give me your feedback on that view of it.
Oh no, I agree that there's been some, and I hate to do this, overwokeness. They really ruined it, right? But also at the same time, I do think that it's necessary when you're talking about the material condition to also engage within the real world politic, and exchange ideas and intellectually engage your colleagues with one another. Now, do you start off by like jumping in and be like, here, we're starting off at like step, like, grad course on settler colonialism? No, you start off like connecting the material conditions to maybe like something economic, and then the roots of exploitation and racialized exploitation. There's like layers, there's layers to this game. So like, I agree, but there are folks that step into it that treat it as their ability to indoctrinate other people, and that's where it's wrong, right? I agree. And I've seen this even happen with teachers in the classroom. Like, I don't really necessarily care if you're right, left, in between, a partisan, right? If you're up there telling the children your like beliefs unfiltered, right, you're indoctrinating them something if you're not interrogating your own views. And unfortunately, folks in this society aren't necessarily asked to interrogate their own views, our own views too much, right? We're in bubbles in social media, in our own social circles. We live in certain areas where people tend to have the same certain type of political leanings that we kind of tend to have, while at the same time, this is replicated throughout this society. So when we're asking people to think outside of their boxes, when we're asking people to really challenge what they think the base core assumptions about the meaning of what it is in this society and in their reality and how they define themselves, right? I mean, that's a very tall order to make. And things like DEI will never get to that point, you know what I mean, just by the very nature of it. But even speaking to the fact that even we struggle staying centered in that type of mind state where we're actually trying to stay open-minded, listen to other people, trying to seek out differing ideas and engage those ideas. And unfortunately, that does not happen.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Like, I mean, I think sometimes, like, again, certain language, like, the colonial or the settler or the, I mean, to me, like one, I don't have a problem with rhetoric. I actually like rhetoric. I think it helps get points across. I think it helps people connect the dots between that mentality, like a settler mentality, and like what happens, today, where folks are just like, oh, I'm going over here and I own this and I'm doing whatever. For me, the overwokeness comes when I hear, and I used to see this as a principal and it's, yeah, I didn't see it as a teacher leader. I didn't see it really till I became a principal, and I started, the first time, you got this youngin showing up late and then going to try to lecture me that time is a white construct. And I'm just like, you idiot. Like, what I mean? Showing up on time. Like, this is what's wrong with the revolution. You were supposed to pick me up and you didn't because you ain't care about time. And then I get locked up, right? Like, so this is the part of, this is what undermines the revolution, this dumb stuff. Like, it's overwokeness, but it's just like idiotic behavior, right? Like, just like, Malcolm said, he don't even trust people without a watch, right? Because you're supposed to be disciplined and timely and reliable. And you talking about you showing up and saying like, well, why I need to do that, or there was one, man, you won't believe that I'm saying this, but I'm saying this is a true story. This educator had all these typos in their PowerPoint, And when they were given constructive feedback about it, they said that, you're overreacting about that. And I'm just like, those are distractions from the message. But you're saying like it's okay because you're reading it as a white person would. Like that's what they said. That's what they gave their supervisor the feedback. Like, well, you're reading this like a white person. Like, and she's like, what are you talking about? Like there's it's misspellings, right? Like fix it, right? And so this idea of like shooting for excellence, like don't come being slovenly and lazy and late and just saying like, well, this is my authentic black self. Well, get another authenticity because that joint ain't working. Re-examine your life and get yourself together. Like, you know what I mean? Like don't use it as a cop out. Like that to me is the ascribing everything, if it's neat, if it's organ. Like, first of all, don't even give you're peddling white supremacy to think that being neat, organized, and timely is a white construct. Like you don't know the history. And then at the same time, you're talking about Africa. Like you don't know Africa. You don't know Africans. You don't know African culture because you're promoting white supremacy to even part your lips to say that this is about being white. When that sunlight comes directly into the pyramid at the exact time, when they're able to tell the time with constellations and all of this, and you're going to tell me about Eurocentricity, like nah, like stop it.
Being on time, being I think one of them was being obsessed with the written word. And instructions
talking
of
about like Africa didn't have written word. We're just like that is dumb. Like that is such a flat way of thinking, and it shows me that you don't know what you're talking about, and you've not lived long enough, and you've not read enough. You've not even thought enough. You haven't thought deeply enough.
And I think
that to me is the overwoke stuff that drives me nuts.
And those examples actually harm the entire enterprise. Right. When you can start pulling up these ridiculous examples of like, oh, we went and sat in a thing that told us that speaking properly or writing properly or sharing a language or being on time to meetings, all of that is white supremacy. So you might be an employer somewhere who's sitting with someone saying, man, you got to like get here on time. Like you were late for the last 3 meetings and you did blah, blah, blah. And that person says, well, that's just white supremacy, blah, blah, blah. Because they had,
I wouldn't be like, you're fired. I wouldn't sound like Trump. You're fired. Like it's crazy. And I've seen it often. And sometimes these folks are leading classrooms of kids. And to me, that's the travesty of it all. Like, you need a deeper level of consciousness and really study like what were the revolutionary thinkers, writers, doers doing? How did they talk about stuff? And it's one thing to use time to punish people or put in time, this like, severity of time over humanity. That's white supremacy. Being timely and reliable is not. And people have to understand the difference.
Did you, have either of you ever done the courageous conversations work in schools? It's like the Glenn
I know
Singleton
it was
stuff.
pretty, like all over. Like, no, we didn't do it specifically as Shoemaker, but I know we did it in the district, at large.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that?
I haven't done it. I think I participated in one session once and like I have the book somewhere. That's the extent.
Yeah, so Glenn Singleton, who is the leader of all that, actually was getting these $1 million, $2 million, $3 million contracts from school districts to go in and have what he terms to be courageous conversations. And those courageous conversations, whatever the content of those conversations, were having a pretty predictable result on a regular basis. Half the teachers mad, the other half of the teachers self-righteous, and no real progress. Right. Like, so, you could come in and have these courageous conversations, but if there's no goal, first of all, if you're paying a lot of money for it, because like, I remember when I was a school board member and I saw this come up and I saw the proposed contract for our district, I was like, I can have a courageous conversation with us for free, right? Like, I don't need to pay $1 million for a courageous conversation. I could be the courageous conversation. Y'all racist.
Yeah. Dinner at Applebee's, bro. Dinner at Applebee's would suffice for me.
Right. So I felt like it, in a way, I felt like I was supportive of the idea, but I also felt like it was a little bit of a hustle, like a little bit of somebody has found their lane. And I only think this way. It's not it's not because of that brother who was leading that effort. It was just because we had so many proposals of so many consultants that were all pitching something similar. Many of them were single person like LLCs who had, gotten their doctorate and, gotten some template from Microsoft Word or something and created kind of like a whole equity and inclusion thing, and then sent us $1 million proposal for 3 hours of work. It's like, I'm exaggerating, but the number of those proposals that we got made me feel like it was an industry. It wasn't a real justice thing. It was more kind of like a occupation and a business opportunity. I hate to be that kind of like, cynical about it, but I don't know. Like, I defend DEI on one side because I think that diversity, equity, and inclusion as a focus to make sure that workplaces and schools are attending to all the people they serve. They're having equal rights for all the people they serve. That is worth defending. At the same time, we got all these overwoke folks who making it hard for me to keep defending it because they keep doing wacky things, right? Wearing a crop top to a business meeting and then talking about it's white supremacy that I can't let it all hang out. Listen, no. I've been an employer. I have employed people. You getting on my nerves. You're getting on my nerves. This ain't about racism. This ain't about white supremacy. You just don't know how to work. See, that sounds like an old man, don't it? That seems like an old person.
Get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn.
But I mean, I think the point always has to like center back to like humanity and outcomes, right? Like, because part of humanity, being humane is like make sure you're having positive outcomes for people, and so sometimes people get stuck in the language and having conversations, but then you don't see the difference, right? Like, so when I was learning how to teach, my coach was like, there are a lot of folks who will go to instructional conferences, conference anything, whatever it is. They'll go to a conference and then they come back and the people they serve don't know that they went to a conference, don't know they went to that book club, don't know that they have, that because they don't see it in the outcomes. They don't see it in how they're experiencing the classroom or the school. Right. Like if I'm a principal and I'm going here, there, but the teachers or the staff or the students and the families don't feel like I'm growing, that, there's positive outcomes. And it's like, all right, what's the point? Right. So I think a lot of it ends up being that. And then my thing about, the sound like an old man, like if you're going to come out of all of that and then say, well, I went to this workshop and I can't teach the kids today, because they've been oppressed. So I'm not going to teach today. They need a hug and a cookie. Matter of fact, not cookie. They need celery. They need a hug and some celery sticks.
Some peanut butter and celery with some raisins on top.
No, we're allergic. We're all allergic to peanets. So no.
Oh, that's true. That's true. We can't even do peanut butter anymore because that's.
But then on the other side is like, and they have hard lives, so we're not going to do any homework. No homework. And today's Monday. Friday, the weekend, they just got back from school. So we're not going to, if I push them, it's oppressive. And today's Friday. So we're not going to teach today because, it's heading into the weekend. They're not going to fit. Oh, right now it's right before lunch. So we're not going to, right? Like it just becomes this thing sometimes. And when you look, you're just like, you're really not about teaching, you're using this, and this can be applied to other spaces as well. So it's like you're using this as a way to not do like the hard work, the rigorous thinking, the rigorous application of the stuff, right? Like, and to me, that's what that's what sometimes I'm seeing in the overwokeness, right? Like it's
you triggered me though. Something you just said.
I know. I hope it was the homework.
It was. Homework is white supremacy, bro. Homework is straight up white supremacy.
That does not make sense.
It does. That's straight up white supremacy. That's like that's some I want to control you not just in school, but I want to control your time when you get home too.
You practice. It's about practice.
Right.
Bro.
You go home,
you
eat,
about?
and you play.
Practice.
You go home, you eat, you play, clean your room, you do that stuff. That's life. You're not gonna like take my mind over at home too by giving me 18 worksheets.
What is the type of homework Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. But the idea well, see, this is the thing. This is the difference between schooling and education. Education and learning is nonstop, cradle to the grave. There is no stopping of learning. And yes, you can do play, you can do this. But if you're reading at home and you're thinking about something, or you're discussing it, interviewing with your family, or you're watching something and you're connecting the dots to that, we're going to discuss it tomorrow, all that's homework. I'm not
Yeah,
talking about mindless worksheets. I'm talking about thinking and connecting. Remember, when I
this is why
describe
you
my
out of touch. This
elementary
is why
school,
you out of touch, is because most parents listening to this are going to say low quality homework is the norm.
oh, I'm agreeing with you.
Low quality
I'm
homework is the
agreeing with
norm.
you.
It's like
So,
makeshift. I
but
got
the
3 kids,
revolution,
and their homework. I've had multiple kids now, but I have 3 right now. If I showed you what they have for homework, it's ridiculous.
so let's
It's like
fight about
nuts.
the quality of learning. Because
Yes.
guess what? Let me tell you something. If their homework is bullshit, their classwork is too.
Would you say that it's white
It
supremacy
ain't no
then?
like,
Because
oh,
I
this
don't want to
deep
say
thinking
homework's white
in the school,
supremacy.
and then at home it's like, oh, da, da, da. Like no. If it's rigorous thinking, intellectual, rigorous like work happening in school, it's going to happen at home. If
Okay,
it's
wait a
not,
second. This is a great example because we coming to the end here, but this is a great example of diversity, equity, inclusion conversation that you would have to have. When you talk about homework,
Mhm.
if homework is going to be graded and it's going to be part of your grade, and your home situation is different than somebody else's home situation when you get home, meaning somebody's home situation is you're going to be working when you get home. Somebody else's home situation is they're going to make themselves a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and sit down and watch cartoons or something, right? In one place, you have a child that has a quiet place to learn in their house or apartment. They have a space where they could go and in quiet focus on their work. You have another child who sleeps in the living room with 3 or 4 other people, and it's always noisy and always crowded. If the work that they do, the quality of the work that they do is going to be graded, it is an inequitable. That is an inequity. If it's not being graded, if it doesn't, because you're going to end up with people that are getting D's and C's, who, if they had the advantages at home that the other person has, they would be getting B's and A's, right? They're not missing those B's and A's on the homework for any other reason than they don't have a quiet place to think and to learn. They don't have a time, like I don't know what your guys' life was, but I would look at some of my friends. They had different situations after school than I had. They had different chores. They didn't have to do, in some cases, no chores. Like in some cases, coming home was free time for them. Free time wasn't, when I came home from school, it wasn't always like just free time. So this is where DEI. See, you gave me a reason that DEI is needed and important, because homework is not thinking about the diversity of families. It is not equitable if you grade it. If you don't grade it, I feel like that might be a little different. But if it's part of my grade, and I'm looking over at my friend and he's got nothing but free time when he gets home, and I'm going to like McDonald's to do a shift after school, we're not the same. You can't grade us on the same homework, and you should be doing a lot in the classroom to do a lot of teaching in the classroom so that you're making up for some of that. Now, is that wrong?
You know what? When that guy said the wussification of America, this is what they were talking about. Like, because I think the brush, I think it's too broad of a brush. To assume that just because they have a quiet, stable home means that they're doing their homework, I think that's false. It doesn't mean that at all.
I think you're right about
if
that. I'm saying the opposite of it, though. I'm
no,
saying
but on the
that
other
part
side,
is true. But on the other side, I do think that's a detractor. Like the other
it
side, you
can
have some
be. But
detractors.
I've only taught Title I schools.
Yeah.
And I knew a lot of the families, and I did social work before I became a teacher, and I knew a lot of families who were in all kind of situations, and how they still found time to. And again, I'm not saying like yay or nay. I'm just saying it's more nuanced than that. I wouldn't put homework as like this super heavy grade, or that they would sink you or anything like that. And I think I think people have to be like just smart about it. Like I wouldn't use it as this punitive type of thing.
Right.
It's an extension. It's a it's something else. And not necessarily penalized, but I think you should be able to get credit for it at the same time, right? So it's, at the end of
Bruh.
the day, I
Ish,
think it's just more complicated
are
than
you
that.
gonna sit here and listen to this white supremacy? Are you gonna are you gonna participate in the cracker matrix? Come on, Ish, help me out here. I know you're gonna agree with Sharif's white supremacy here, but I mean,
I mean,
come on,
I am more towards where Sharif's at when it comes to homework.
bruh. I'm so distressed. Now I know why we need DEI. Now I know why we need DEI.
Just off the strength of like, if it's good, if it's like a child, like a 7, 8-year-old shouldn't be expected to do 2 hours worth of homework a night, which I've seen my child do before, right? But doing like a half an hour of reading, of focused reading, maybe like, practicing some types of words that they're learning throughout that week, right? Those type of things are perfectly fine. Now, I think that some people mistake it for like, rigorous homework that is truly valuable with kind of crap that doesn't mean anything, right? Also, at the same time, I think that there should be lesser of a grade on it. Right. There should be less value placed on it. Like after a certain amount, like it counts for a certain thing. Like the way I would do it probably is like, here, there's homework like every single night of school, but you only have to hand in this amount
You
at
choose
this
3
amount
of
of
the
time.
days. So,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that. There's different ways where you can make it happen because quite frankly, we do want to incentivize kind of like students learning during their own time and learning in the sense of like valuable learning in conjunction to what's actually happening in the classroom. Now, at the same time, does it operate like that? No. Does everything real in this society get turned into a gimmick? Yes. So
I mean,
we are
you're saying what should be. You're talking about what should be, but what we know about American education is what should be often is not what it should be, and low quality homework, I would have to say, is the norm. I would also say about this. It's different when you have one teacher. So in the grades where you have one teacher, that teacher knows how much you're being loaded up with. But we can get to the part where you have 4 or 5 teachers and 4 or 5 classes, and 2 of them give you 1-hour projects and another one gives you a half-hour project or whatever. Now all of a sudden you got 3, 4 hours of stuff that you got to do on a night, and you are totally burnt out. By the time you finish your homework in each of those different classes, and first of all, the quality of your work for each of those individual classes goes down. Because you're having to like, I only got an hour to do this one. I got hour to do this other one or whatever. And before you know, it's 10,
I
it's 10
only
o'clock.
have 3 hours to play my video game, right?
No, you won't have any time. You won't have any time on some nights.
That would be my first question. I'd be like, you had too much homework. How much time are you spending on Facebook and whatever, TikTok?
Let's just say none. Let's just say on some nights you're going to go to school and you're going to come home, do your homework, and then you're going to take a bath and go to bed.
Then I'll say that's not the typical American child these days.
No. I have 3 kids. There are a lot of days where they are completely upset and burned out by bedtime because they did nothing but classwork at home. And as a parent, you get pissed off because you're like, well, show me then. Show me what is it? Like, what's taking you so long? And then you start seeing it, and it's like multiple different worksheets. Multiple different just fill in the box type of things. A lot of it looks like make work. A lot of it doesn't even look like teaching.
It's made up stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, made up stuff. And then some of it.
But that's the revolution, right? Like that's what the pushback should be: quality learning, extension opportunities. But what you've been leading the march, when I saw you marching down the street with your banners, it was no homework.
I'm still for no homework. I think homework is white supremacy.
Improvement homework.
Homework is white supremacy, bro. It's like straight up plantation science is what it is.
I was traveling, I see it, and I'm like, that looked like Chris. Chris had all these families, they were marching down the street. No more homework. No more homework.
It's plantation science. I own you not just in school, I own your mind when you out of school. Sun up to sundown, I got you. You and me. You don't get to think nothing else. Don't be thinking nothing outside of what I want you to think. Well, I'm glad we had this conversation because where I end is different than where I began. Because of you two white supremacists, I see that we need DEI in the public schools. We need it. We have got to have DEI because if not, you're going to have schools doing racist things like giving homework to our kids, which, who wins? Who wins with that? Nobody, really. All right, well, listen, my final word on DEI and this week, I enjoyed this conversation. My final word is just, I will defend it to the extent that it is making work and education life easier for people that have been marginalized and is making it more fair for them and making accommodations for them. I will not defend it to the point where bourgeois graduate school people actually take it, make it an occupation and a business model, of which they invent all kinds of language that doesn't have anything to do with the people that they say that they're working for. So that's my final word on it. And I will say homework is racist. But y'all go ahead. Go ahead. Final word from you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think DEI and its attack on DEI is a consistent theme, like ever since. This was Dr. Foley used to talk about liberated and not yet free, and that journey from being liberated from those physical chains to actually being free has not come to full fruition. And you can look at legal system, educational system, political system, economic system, and see that has not happened. So, to me, this rabid attack against DEI is just another version, and they're using the term as a diversionary tactic. Because ultimately they're fighting against full citizenship and full, being treated like as full human beings. But DEI is a way to organize themselves against something, to align people who, even in their best interests, would be for DEI, aligning in that. It's like, states where they invest more in prison than in schools. Knowing if your citizenry is well educated, it actually makes your state an economic engine. It makes your state powerful and just exceeding in all type of metrics. But they don't care about that, because like for some reason, despite the fact of saying, every time I hear someone's in power speak, they talk about prosperity of everybody. Well, education is the foundation for prosperity for everyone. But yet that is something that is not looked at as critical for everybody, as long as a select few get it. So to me, it's the same war, different type of battle, different name of the battlefield, same exact war since we've been on these shores.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing, just like from the very jump, what the so-called goals of DEI are, right? This society has been blatantly anti-DEI. And there's been moments and blips of time where we can point to where things were moving and shifting, where folks were really willing to address some of the historical circumstances that created right now, right? But then at the same time, that only lasts a short amount of time, and then there's backlash, right? And so when we're seeing this current attack, that does not surprise me. If anything, that was like, as soon as it happened, it's like that John's already dead. It just doesn't know it's dead yet. And, I think we do have to be extremely honest about that reality, use these opportunities in these spaces when we can, whether they're crawl, you coming in, kicking in the door, waving in the 4-4. But it's also also important to recognize that that's not how you're going to get liberation. You're not going to get liberation through your institution's DEI office. I just want to say that in this society will not become more free because of more of those things or less of those things or laws against those things, right? At the end of the day, this society is not about that life. And we just got to be honest with that and then push where we can, pull when we can, and then use any opportunity that we can to exploit maybe differences within ruling elites, right? Or differences within folks across other countries and everything in order to push more advantageous opportunities for us to gain liberation. And, DEI is only to an extent, but its pushback is inevitable.
That's dope. That's deep. I knew I was going to have a good conversation with you all about this because I have unfinished thoughts about it all. But you guys brought so much levity to it. For our listeners and for the people watching this, we really appreciate you showing up for our conversations and sharing it with other people. We see you share it sometimes. We get some pretty good feedback at times too about the nature of these conversations being educative, being like educationally valuable. And that's interesting. That's cool because we are three brothers talking about education and politics on a weekly basis. So if you find that much value in it, we're doing our job. So appreciate you so much. If you want to help us grow the audience and the community that we are building around these conversations, please share it with people that you think would be interested in seeing it on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching or hearing us. We appreciate you as always. This has been another episode of Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you're freer after this hour with Sharif and Ish and me. We will see you on the next episode.